All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're digging into the chapters of history that, well, got torn out of the textbook. We are going to uncover some incredible stories of empires and ideas that were systematically erased, giving us a much more complete and, honestly, more interesting picture of our human story.
So, I want you to start with this question. What if the historical story you've always accepted as the full picture is actually a carefully edited version? You know, a story where entire civilizations, vast empires of knowledge and wealth, were just intentionally left out.
Here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start by identifying these missing chapters, then expose the myth that was used to justify taking them out. We'll visit these incredible empires of gold and knowledge, explore a universe built from mathematics, and then really understand the deliberate architecture of their erasure. And finally, we'll talk about why reclaiming this bigger human story is so critical today.
Okay, so our goal here isn't just to add a few footnotes to the history books. No way. It's about restoring entire chapters of human achievement that have been pushed to the margins for centuries. This gives us a way more accurate and, frankly, a much cooler picture of our shared past.
You know, for a long time, the grand story of civilization has been presented like this linear relay race. The baton gets passed from Mesopotamia to Egypt, then to Greece, Rome, and boom, on to Europe. But that story leaves huge parts of the world completely in the dark, painting them as if they were just sitting around waiting for civilization to arrive, instead of being active creators of it.
And here's the thing. Leaving out entire histories wasn't some kind of accident. It was a deliberate project. And it was justified by these so-called scientific ideologies that were specifically designed to create a hierarchy of human worth and, make exploitation seem logical.
And a real cornerstone of this was something called the Hamitic hypothesis. This was this pervasive, completely baseless theory that said anytime you found evidence of advanced civilization in Africa, whether it's incredible architecture, metalworking, or complex governments, it must have been brought there by some outside non-African group. It was essentially a convenient way to look at genius and flat out deny where it came from.
But of course, the actual evidence, the archaeology, the historical records, it all tells a totally different story. This quote just nails it. Long before any sustained contact with Arabs or Europeans, sophisticated urban societies were thriving all across the continent. They weren't waiting around for anything. They were building. Which brings us to our first deep dive. Let's head over to West Africa and see just how the empires there completely demolished this myth of primitivism. We're talking about centers of unbelievable wealth, complex governments, and just profound intellectual achievement.
So you've probably heard of Mansa Musa, the emperor of Mali back in the 14th century. His trip to Mecca is the stuff of legend. He gave away so much gold in Cairo that he actually tanked the regional economy for a decade. But that incredible wealth, it wasn't even the empire's greatest treasure. The real measure of Mali's power isn't just gold. It's this number. 700,000. In what was supposed to be a primitive medieval empire, what on earth could that number possibly represent? That's the estimated number of manuscripts held in the libraries and universities of Timbuktu. 700,000 texts on astronomy, botany, law, history, medicine, philosophy, you name it. Timbuktu was one of the world's great intellectual capitals. It was an empire built not just on gold, but on knowledge.
All right. Now let's jump across the Atlantic to the Americas, to another civilization whose intellectual achievements were so profound, they're still blowing our minds today, the ancient Maya.
Think about this. At a time when Europeans were still struggling with those clunky Roman numerals, the Maya were using this incredibly elegant and efficient dot and bar system. It was a base 20 system, which let them do unbelievably complex calculations with just 3 simple symbols.
And that leads to something absolutely crucial. The Maya independently developed the concept of zero. This is one of the greatest intellectual leaps in all of human history. It wasn't just a placeholder, it was a numerical value that made their complex math possible. And for the Maya, it was literally the key to unlocking the cosmos.
Their math was the engine behind the long count calendar, probably the most sophisticated timekeeping system in the ancient world. They could record historical dates with absolute precision, like we see here with King Pakaw's birth recorded to the exact day. But they could also think about time on a staggering scale. They actually referenced a date that would occur in the year 4772. They placed their own history inside this vast cosmic framework. So we've seen these amazing empires of intellectual and economic power in both Africa and the Americas, which brings us right back to that big question. If these civilizations were so advanced, why are they so often just treated like historical footnotes?
The story of Great Zimbabwe gives us a really stark answer. When European colonizers stumbled upon this massive city of stone, built with these incredibly sophisticated techniques, their entire worldview just couldn't handle it. They flat out refused to believe that the local Shona people were capable of such an incredible architectural achievement.
And this right here is basically the playbook for how to erase history. Step 1. You find undeniable proof of indigenous genius. Step 2. Because it completely contradicts your belief in your own superiority, you just refuse to accept it. Step 3. You invent some outside builders, Phoenicians, Arabs, basically anyone but the people who actually live there. And step 4, you bake this lie into the colonial education system, teaching generations that their own ancestors never accomplished anything of value.
So why does all this matter now? Why bother correcting these old historical lies? Well, because this isn't just some academic debate. It has profound effects on how we see the world and each other, right now.
By erasing these stories, we didn't just deny achievement to Africans or Native Americans. We actually impoverished our collective understanding of what it means to be human. We limited our own perspective on what people are capable of, and we created this false, narrow, and just way less impressive story of our species' journey.
This quote just sums it all up perfectly. These civilizations weren't some isolated curiosities. The gold from the Mali Empire fueled the economies of medieval Europe. The mathematics of the Maya were centuries ahead of their time. These stories aren't separate from world history. They are absolutely central to it.
You know, putting these chapters back in makes our shared human story richer, more complex, and more truthful. But it also leaves us with one last thought. If entire empires of gold and ink and brilliant cities that literally mapped the cosmos could be so effectively erased, what other stories are still out there, just waiting for us to reclaim them?